through my own discoveries and mistake, is to give people the chance to not give themselves such a hard time in the pursuit of goals, which may, when you get them, be meaningless. And that sounds quite harsh, but there's many trophies and medals that have been won, and you get there and you go, is this it? We could choose to be fulfilled along the way, and we would do that with a different approach. I do this thing, magic, diving, and I'm a human being, and here are the small things that make up that level of joy, gratitude and fulfillment each day.
Welcome to the Unlocked podcast. Today I have a very special guest, a good friend, BBC commentator, Olympic medalist, professional speaker, and we also work together. Welcome, Leon Taylor. Hello.
Hi, Ricky. Thank you.
Good to see you. Almost like we've practiced that loads of times before, isn't it?
Almost. Almost.
This is very exciting for me, Leon. We've been talking about this for a while. I have been procrastinating for a while about getting you on the show, and I thought we'll come do this in style. So obviously for anyone that's listening to this, you can also watch this as well, because this podcast is also being videoed, and we've come down to the big smoke today. So very excited for this, Leon, because there's lots of things that we're going to talk about today that I think a lot of these listeners will be able to take away, implement in their lives. Not only going to help to, look at some of their limiting beliefs, but also about how they can control tips to improve their mental health as well. Now, obviously, we've known each other for a little bit of time, but we'll probably expand into that a little bit later. But firstly, Leon, my question is this. What is it, or what does it take to be an Olympian? And can you share with us your journey into the world of diving and why you pursued into being an Olympian?
Yeah, I can only retrospectively answer that, really, because if you, I'm sure everyone listening and watching was once a child, maybe some still are. And when you're a child, you get into certain things, right? So things that vie for our attention these days, but back in the old days, there was obviously the TV and all that kind of stuff, and I wouldn't sit still. In fact, it's going to be pretty tricky for me here.
Me
you
too.
see me shifting. I wouldn't sit still. The story goes, my mum and dad, I was firstborn. I was challenging from the get-go. I mean, we're both parents now, aren't we, with youngsters in toddler phase. So as soon as I was born, it was clear that I was going to be challenging, because I would cry a lot and I wouldn't sleep, which you and I were both talking before this pod around the challenges of disrupted sleep. So my parents didn't have the best start, and neither did I. So something clearly, challenging me as a baby, and that kind of didn't really go away, because by the time I was crawling and walking, I didn't really want to sleep. I would never go down. I would only fall asleep in the back of the car. So my mum and dad would drive me around the block to try and, put me, as soon as I would fall asleep, they would pull up, park, put the handbrake on, and I would be, crying again. So they didn't really know what to do with me, but they knew that if they wanted some rest, they would have to try and tire me out. So my dad tells stories of building an obstacle course, as I'm sure many parents do, the sofa and the cushions, and I would jump and leap off that, and it would be this adventure. And then there were lots of activities kind of related to physical movement, learning to swim, for example. I used to love being in the water. I think you can see where this is going. And then mother and baby gymnastics, which then goes to toddler kind of tumble tots and such like. So my mum and dad's strategy was to tire me out, and there was lots of places we could go to try and achieve that. And I think to some degree they managed it, but I definitely wasn't particularly easy to manage, I think is a nice way of saying it. They even took me to the family doctor, who labelled me, I don't think there were many labels available back then, labelled me as a problem child, and told my mum and dad if they couldn't cope that he could sedate me. Right. Well, I never really know whether he was offering them sedation so they could get some rest. But anyway, this was a while ago, and my mum and dad stepped away from that kind of intervention, and they decided to pursue as many activities as possible where I was moving and that it would tire me out. So my life of physical activity started way before I can remember. And my life in adventures in sports started organically. So I was just doing these things I really enjoyed. And then it was like, oh, right, well, you like swimming. You're part of the swimming club. You've learnt to swim. You're now 6. You're doing the one length, race for 6-year-olds, which I got a rosette for probably, or even a medal like when I was 6. And then it was like, oh, I like this. So my attention deficit hyperactivity symptoms, that I don't think that was invented back then, so I wasn't diagnosed or given that title, if you will, but certainly there's a collection of challenges. So at school, the instruction, sit still, concentrate and be quiet. I don't know how that landed for you at the school, Vicky, but it wouldn't work for me. I was in trouble all the time. When I was thriving, I was moving, right? So in the playground, all of the activities I subsequently started to attend. And my mum and dad were selfless, and they took me to swimming and gymnastics and, swimming early in the morning. And my youngest sister, 3 years younger, she followed me around and was like, oh, I want to try that. I want to try that. So my poor parents were exhausted. And to answer your question in a roundabout way, how did I start to pursue becoming an Olympian? I didn't know the Olympics existed till I watched them on the TV, and it captured my imagination. It's a story that you've heard many times around the Olympics being broadcast from Los Angeles, and that moment of my ambition and Olympic flame, to use a little bit of a metaphor. It was like, I want to do that. My behaviours changed, and I took, my sports very seriously, wrote down my best time next to the Guinness Book of World Records, the record holder and such. This was really, but I was really determined. I was asking all the time, this kind of dream of the Olympic Games. I was 6, 7, 8. I didn't realise how that I'd be training for 6 or 7 hours a day, 6 days a week, of all of the things and the barriers and challenges, and how whatever percentage of the population make it, to the 300 or so spots on Team GB per Olympic Games, which is every 4 years. So the kind of that happened organically. It was a dream, and then then you've got these markers along the way. So when you're a youngster, under 10s, are you the best in the county, the district, the country? Then you've got these markers, and you start to go. So I started diving at the age of 8, and it was just another sport I said yes to trying. The reason I ended up excelling in diving was because I've been doing gymnastics from the age of 2. And I could, exactly. So if you think about the transferable skills, handstands, somersaults, obviously gymnastics, you're landing on your feet, and diving, landing on your head. So you need to not confuse those two, as you can imagine. So it all happened organically. So this kind of pursuit, it was a dream. And then obviously as the journey unfolds, then there's points where, moments of disillusion and, am I going to make it? Is it worth it? What about school? But for me, the big reason why, the desire, that dream was always so powerful. And I was able to hit these, performance markers along the way, which was like, well, if you keep going, you're already here, the best junior in the country. Now you're 16, you've made the men's team. Now you're doing your A-levels and trying to qualify for the Olympics in the same year. That's pretty tough. Some people probably said, oh, you probably won't do it. And that was the motivation I potentially needed, because of the way that I responded to the kind of the adversity or setbacks or people's opinion, and I chose a sport which was very much around that. So it wasn't an easy choice because of that, selection and judges and such like. There's luck and randomness involved as well. The fact that my parents took me to different sports, and there happened to be those available in the local area. And and at the age of 18, I did my A-levels and Olympics in the same year, and that was like the step in. At it was most all of my fellow students were on study leave, and I was in rather glamorously, but hard, because dragging my study books around. I was in the US Olympic qualifier, and then down to Mexico for Olympic qualifier. Came back, had 2 days at home, went up to Edinburgh for the Olympic trials, came back for 1 day, and sat my first A-level.
Wow. So at that point then, any of your friends at school at that point also training for the Olympics as well?
No.
So I mean, what's in their heads? Like, oh my God, Leon, is Leon going to be here today? Oh no, he's training out there. That must be quite a strange experience for a young man to to be visual. We're all trying to, become friends and start social circles at that point. So how does that feel at that point when you're, I'm focused on this big dream, this big important thing, but also I'm conscious of life as well?
Yeah.
It has to happen.
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, there's time management, right? I had to learn very quickly, okay, so how am I going to be able to do this? Because you can't do everything, because there isn't enough space for it. But you can be focusing your attention purely on what you're doing at the time. So something I learned very early on was, when I'm at the back of the diving board at that time, I need to be focusing on the dive I'm doing, not thinking about the A-level psychology coursework that I haven't done yet. Right? Yeah. And when I'm doing my A-level psychology coursework, I need to be knuckling down for that, not thinking when am I going to go out with my mates for a few beers. Right? It's that kind of thing. And when I'm out with my mates for a few beers, I'm thinking, wow, this is a unique opportunity, because I can't do this very often because of these commitments. And so, so there was that element of being able to really be in the moment and hyper focus on what I was doing and not be kind of like procrastinating or second guessing or putting myself through the ring of feeling guilty having not done something. And then, the worst thing you can do at the back of the diving board is be thinking about something else.
Yeah, of course.
To be, in the moment and going. So that was an accelerated learning for me. But of course, I wanted to do it all and did it all. And it was hard. Made a lot of mistakes along the way, trying to be incredibly social, excel, in my sport and maintain my commitment to my A-levels at that time.
Of course, yeah. It's a big thing, isn't it? Especially at that age doing that. I'm quite curious about, as I'm sure you have this conversation when you talk to a lot of people about the idea of, training. Was it 7 hours a day?
Yeah, when I was full time. Yeah, that's a long. Yeah, it's a long time in the saddle, isn't it?
So it's a long time, and for people like even myself, like I totally get it. But it's like, God, to most people, they're like, I wouldn't be able to do that because it's difficult. So I'm quite curious about how do you stay consistently motivated, especially when I think about, especially in the Olympics, once you get to the Olympic level, you've got 4 years to do your training for something that's going to last, maybe a couple of minutes, couple of seconds when you do your dive. That's a long time to be training. How do you stay motivated through that?
Yeah, it's a really nice question. And motivation is interesting, isn't it? Is how we're motivated. So I find motivation a bit fickle, and when you need it, it's not there. So what was it like for me? Because I didn't wake up every day and think, oh great, I'm so motivated, I can't wait to go and train for 6 hours with no one watching me and no one really giving monkeys and blah blah blah. It's not like those moments of standing in the spotlight. It makes it all worthwhile when you get to do your thing, which is compete. And of course Olympics every 4 years, but there are World Championships, Commonwealth Games, Europeans, there's plenty of competition. So there's this seasonal kind of 4 year cycle. And of course, the Olympic Games are the most important to an athlete who's an Olympic athlete, Paralympic athlete, etc. So how do you stay motivated? Well, so how did I train for 7 hours? Well, I just did, right? And that's not me just going, well, of course I just did. It was like, well, when I was 10, I was training 2 hours of swimming in the morning and a couple of hours of something else, of an evening. Yeah. And then when I finished my A-levels and I was, deciding what I was going to do, working as a lifeguard, was going to go to university in America, decided not to, stayed here in the UK, went to university in Sheffield, Hallam instead. I was able to train full time and study around it. So I was fitting in all the hours, and then decided that I needed to step back from my undergraduate commitment, because at that time I couldn't fit it in around the travelling and the training. And I thought, well, I can always go back as a mature student, but I can't move the Olympic Games.
Yeah, of
so
course.
I had to make that choice. So how did I train for that? Mostly kind of built up over time, became a habit. How did I not rely on motivation? Well, I put commitment in its place, because motivation is a feeling based kind of notion, right? Whereas commitment is very practical. And it was like, well, I'm committed to my coach, who's going to be there, so, and my team members, and I've got a big reason why. And so the structure was there. So it's the whole. I'm a big fan of James Clear. I'm sure many
Atomic
of you
Habits,
yeah. So it's Atomic Habits. One of his principles is like this environment design, right? So you design the environment where the desired behaviour takes place. So high performance environment in sport, which is what I grew into, bearing in mind it was like here, there, and then by the time I was training those hours, we were fortunate in GB sport to then receive funding. So I was working with psychologists, nutritionists, people who were very invested, experts invested in allowing me to improve my performance, right? And that comes with some challenges, is right, because then it becomes really important, and then you start messing it up, and we could talk about mental health and where that goes. But can you see how that, and your listeners hopefully can kind of track how, you're building something, over time, so it just becomes what you do, and you're
second nature in a way.
But you're swinging it, so you're not having to rely on motivation. Because obviously you need it at times, where there's discipline and motivation is slightly different, but the discipline of showing up, and then when the environment is designed for you to do that thing, then it's much, much easier for you to do that thing. And then it's habit, repetition. What makes a high performer in sport is that you're willing to be bored and put in the reps. Because as you said, my dives took 1.5 seconds. I did have to do several of them, and every single one of them counted. So there's no room for errors, or, there is obviously room for error, because there's no such thing as perfection, but can you be consistently at your best in that environment? And the environment was much more challenging because of it's not like the long jump or a javelin where you take your best effort. And if you've got a no throw or a no jump or underperform, it's fine. Whereas diving, it's like, well, dive number 1 is added to 2, added to 3, and it's an accumulation score that counts. So it's the consistency that you were after, which is why you had to train so many hours. But I didn't just train in the pool. There's the trampoline, the weight room, working with the physios. There's all these different elements to the very challenging execution of dives, diving from the different diving boards, different heights.
You remind me of, so one of the previous guests was Steve Judge, also from Sheffield, para-triathlete for Great Britain. And when he had his accident, which we'll talk a little bit about recovery later on, when he had his big accident, he had to grow his leg back by about like 3 inches, which just sounds crazy. I think he had that big Elizarov cage around his leg. You know, he said, like, I certainly didn't have 10,000 hours. You know, we talk about 10,000 hours of mastery. I just had to make the hours count. And I'm assuming that's the same thing for you. You know, I've got a set amount of time here today, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that every hour's got to count because this big goal is going to come. And that's a huge pressure, you know, for even someone at a young age. I'm very curious to understand then all that time, that commitment, those habits being put in there. You're then standing on a world stage, you know, Great Britain's behind you, you know, you're traveling all over the world. When you're on that moment, when you're standing on that diving board, what is going through your head?
Nothing. And you knew that I was probably going to answer that, didn't you? Because if you are considering all the things that you just, you were leading up to that question, if you even consider half of that for a nanosecond, you're going to be distracted at best. And this whole notion of, you know, choking or folding under the pressure, that's, you know, thinking getting in the way. So there's a consideration to all of those things, you know, and there's a framing, isn't there? So if you're, you know, making something more important than it actually is, which I made a mistake of, making the outcome the most important thing, which you can't control. You know, that I can't control that I'm going to win an Olympic medal. But I can influence the performance in that setting. So that's a good place to focus, because if the Chinese, the US, the Germans, the Australians, they all come out and, you know, in the synchro or in the individual, and they're rocking it and they're better than me, I can't control that. The only thing I can control is my performance. And then I can influence that. There's a kind of ideal, you know, performance that you want to do under the circumstances where you are. But then it comes down to that notion of process, and that's back into the weeds of what am I doing every day in order to be able to stand in that moment that you just teed up and not lose your composure.
State, absolutely.
Not to use your state, composure, whatever the emotional state, nervousness and adrenaline. You've got to get that mix beautifully right for you. So some athletes, depending on their sport, like to be quite adrenalized, pumped up. But if that goes too far,
like footballers we see with like headphones coming off, like Arsenal bus or whatever. So they kind of get pumped up. Weightlifters are a great example. They've got to be quite fired up. You know, if I was fired up as a weightlifter, I would make a mess of my dive. So I need to be a bit more zen, a bit more calmer.
So there's that perfect mix per, you know, we're all as unique as our thumbprint. So per athlete, per sport, you know, there's that mix. So are you going to listen to music? Music can influence your state, you know, quite incredibly. So for me, it was just a bit too, maybe not. So things that I would rely on in order to maintain that composure. And where you place your attention, excuse me, you're in charge of that. So if I'm standing at the back of the diving board, not the end where I'm about to dive, at the back of the diving board going, wow, look at all those 15,000 people. This is really important. I've trained for 7 hours a day, 7 days a week, 10,000 hours, which is made up, by the way. It's much more muscular. So it doesn't really matter. Is you are where you are, and it's been a massive commitment. It was a dream. Now it's, you know, reality. And, you know, if I start thinking of this, I'm going to likely to mess it up because I'm getting in my own way.
Absolutely.
Easy to do. Because it's important, and when you're committed to an endeavour, you know, it's easy to try too hard, to put pressure on yourself. You know, to talk about pressure and expectation, where does it come from? Well, you know, it's internal, and you can you know, rationalise it with, oh yes, the external. What isn't? It's actually what's going on within you, which you do have some influence over as well.
Well, we also, you know, this has been discussed a lot on previous episodes about, it's an old NLP thing about, you wouldn't let me come around, I mean, you might do, who knows, because this is quite a nice red colour, but you wouldn't let me come around your house and start painting all your walls red. I mean, unless you've already got red, Leon, I don't know.
No.
Okay, that's cool.
I think I'd stop
maybe Ali wouldn't be very
you.
happy with me, right? But we wouldn't let anyone do that to our own house, but we then do let people come into our own houses in our mind, like a metaphor, and start throwing our state out. Oh my God, this is a lot of people. Oh my God, Great Britain's watching me right now. This is live. So that's when we can start to lose that thing. Before we come back to that, because I'd like to obviously discuss some of the tools that you use to be in Zen. And I've seen you do on one of your videos when you're doing your diving, it's almost like you're just like yeah, just like, as you mentioned, in that Zen state, which love to cover on that in a second. Question was this. You obviously do synchronized swimming as well.
Diving.
Diving, sorry. Yeah, I shouldn't say swimming. Diving. With
Well, no,
Pete.
it's just for confusion. Yeah.
What's it like so if you're so we've mentioned this before when we've done when we've stood up to the Run Presentation Mastery Workshop, I'm kind of like the opposite, where I'm like, I've got an anchor, which is this one song I listen to. It pumps me up, fires me up. The Circle of Excellence, I like doing that, stepping into that, and that's making me there. And you're the more, I need to go a bit more calmer. When you've partnered up and done synchronized diving, not swimming, what's it like working with someone else where, are they doing the same thing, getting into state? Are they calm? And if they're not, how do you then make that balance together?
Yeah, so it depends, right?
Yeah.
So the diving's an individual sport. So you've got the individual event, but you've also got the team event, which is the synchronized event. So same diving board, 2 people. So you get judged on the execution of the dives, but also the synchronization.
Yeah.
So like working with anyone in a team, you've got to know what's important to them, what they need. And then you honour that and support it as best you can. And just because someone needs to do cartwheels and listen to heavy metal thrash music before they go to jump in the pool,
Yeah.
it's not like, oh no, you can't do that because I need to listen to classical and and just be. So you find a way that you work together, and that's clear, concise communication, really clear on the reason why, what you're doing, and then process. What's this process? How do we work together as a team in order to get the best out of each other? And then how do we support and challenge each other in that way? High levels of accountability as well. So, you want to be keeping each other motivated and honest by your behaviours and your commitment to what you're trying to achieve, but also the compassion of, so for example, when I would mess up a dive, I would get out of the water and I wouldn't be going, oh, that's fine. I'd be going, and I would be beating myself up because I was annoyed, frustrated because I could do better. And it would be Pete who would then put his hand on my shoulder, hey, come on, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And then he would reframe it. Most important dive is the next dive.
Great. Yeah.
Which is true, right?
Yeah,
and he's just given me permission through a teammate to do that. Whereas I'm there beating myself up because I've let the team down or whatever, which you could see how unhelpful that narrative would be if it was left unchecked. So you've got that relationship where you can, do what you need to do for each other. And that works over time when you get to know someone and, those conversations.
Yeah.
Performance evaluation, what went well, specifically. So what are we going to repeat and what we're going to do differently next time?
Great,
and those are really nice ways of performance evaluating, and there's loads that can come out of that. And then you do it in that order, even when the result is, we ended up 4th in the Olympic Games, which is heartbreaking for many reasons. And then the World Championships just before the next Olympic Games, where if you win a medal, you qualify automatically, became 4th again then, right? So there's this whole notion of, uncontrollable nature, and it just kind of lends itself to knowing what you're trying to do. So performance evaluation, even when the outcome is something as heartbreaking as 4th, you don't go, right, what went wrong? Because you start catastrophizing, and then you put too much weight on something that's might not have made that much difference. So you start off with, I'm really hurting, 4th is really galling, okay, what went well? Weight, and then we just with discipline went through systematically. So it was this part of the training went well, okay, this went well, okay, that and then you start to build this really comprehensive understanding, evaluation of what went well. And then you have a look at what are we going to do differently next time? What were the things that obviously this it didn't go as it could have done, this is this. And then when you're looking at that, it's not like I'm holding my hands in the air like catastrophize. Oh my God, everything went wrong. Well, no, it didn't. There was a couple of things that went wrong, and then you're able to do that. So that performance evaluation was really important, and having that discipline and commitment to that feedback and evaluation means that you continue to improve or attempt to improve your performance.
Interesting. Well, very curious about the whole idea. You mentioned already that nothing's going on in your head.
Ideally. That's the goal. That's the goal. Yeah, when you get it right, there's nothing going on.
Yeah. And it's a bit like, you've said this before, where a lot of your dives in the past, like some of your best dives, are ones you kind of remember because you're just in that flow state. You know, I'm very curious. There's 2 questions here that I'm going to go off on a tangent in a second, but
play some jazz.
The first one, is a little bit of, so me as a speaker and a magician, there's a point in my life where you start doing tricks down the pub. That's how you start off. And then it becomes very serious, like, oh, okay, this is a business. This is a professional thing. Very curious of what point was it in your career where you went, okay, this is something I really enjoy. It fills my cup. It gets me excited. To now, this is very serious. This is world stage, competitive edge now. What was the point there where you went, oh yeah, this is serious now?
Yeah, it was way before the world stage, I think. As I mentioned, there's the whole like comparison, right? So comparison is like, okay, here I am ranking against, those in my age group in this area, that area, and this kind of. And I think the closer you get to, I guess, international selection and representing your country, then it starts to go, oh, now it's, and then as soon as you get funding, that's a big thing. Right, so now it's not your hobby anymore. Now you're receiving a grant of money to do what you do. And then you start thinking, oh, hang on a second, right, you need to take it seriously now. Not that you weren't before, but there's an element. And that's
accountability now,
Yeah, and that can actually be detrimental to your enjoyment and your performance.
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
Because when you squeeze the life out of something, make it more important, so the joy, and you hear all sports people when they're interviewed just going, oh, I just want to enjoy it, and because it does the seriousness kind of creeps in, and the accountability, and the you're being paid, and you got to do this, and my job's on the line for that, and if you don't perform this, then this happens, and all of this stuff gets layered on, and it becomes the thing, and you forget deep down the big reason why. Why you did it, and also we are judged by our outcomes, and the results are important, and so it's not like, oh well, it didn't matter, just bombed out the Olympic Games. Oh well, all those hours quote unquote wasted. It's not about being like that, but and at the same time it's being okay, just having a strong preference for desired outcome, and then you just being okay with what is, and that's very philosophical, and that's kind of where I'm at these days when I'm working with young athletes as a mentor. I'm very much of the conversation, I'm interested in the human being. The fact they do a sport is great, and I honour that, and I'm like, great, but what else? What else are you interested in? What else fires you up? What else passions? Because I learned that when you have other things to focus your attention on, your sport performance naturally improves. But when the only thing you have is your sport, then if it's going well, it's fine, the world's a great place, and as soon as it goes the other way, the whole thing comes down, which is why the mental health duty of care and challenges that many athletes face is so relevant and so important of how we have conversations with athletes. So if I'm talking to someone all the time, and everyone used to know me as the diver, right? So how's that for my identity? So I'm the diver, the Olympic diver,
the magician.
The thing that, and therefore you go, oh no, that's it's what I do, not who I am. But it becomes so important that that's what I get known for, and then it's like, people would stop in the street going, oh, you're the diver's mum and dad, aren't you? Or you're the diver. And it was just a whole...
No, I'm just Leon.
I'm
also Leon.
So you can see how the culture doesn't lend itself to that kind of merging of what you do and who you are, or the predominant lead of what you do.
This is very... I mean, I wasn't thinking about even saying this, but we'll come to this in a second. That was a very similar feeling to me in 2020, when obviously the world... You remember there was a global pandemic? Big thing.
I can remember it. I was involved.
You was involved, When magic stopped, and I remember just like crying.
The magic stopped?
It's still there, Leon. It was still going. But I was sitting there, and I remember crying on my dining table going, excuse my French, what the fuck have I done? I've left a career to pursue my dreams further. I've got this business. There's no business anymore. And when I started to tell people, like, Mum, Dad, I'm really not well. And they're like, what do you mean, Ricky? We've seen you on Instagram. You're smiling. You're happy. You're performing. I went, yeah, I know, but Mum, that's the magician. I need to tell me, like, and ask me, how am I really? Because actually I'm a human being as well. So I love that. You're absolutely right there. Yeah, we are just humans.
How did you navigate that then? Let's because there's a lot resonating with me, because mine's very similar for me, but a number of years before. But go.
Yeah, lots of tears. Netflix. Lots of tears, and actually just speaking and being honest, and just say, look, hey, friends, family, look, you've seen me as this big character, and I am, but I'm also a human being, and you know what, I'm not well at the minute, and I need to have a conversation. I wasn't, diagnosed with any depression or anything like that, but I think it was very, very bad mental health, and it was just trying to, we did the whole Friends thing. You've seen Friends, right? The whole, what Ross, the three boys, are pushing the sofa up the stairs, and what the word they shout out, do you know the episode?
Go on.
They shout, pivot! It's one of those things. As soon as I started to put my focus into something fun, I'm going to do online magic shows or do something like that, then I started to kind of turn around. But it was just that. I mean, we were all there, weren't we? It was an uncertain period, right? What do we
hugely
do?
destabilising for many, if not all.
Yeah, lots of things. 2 questions.
You're always asking me 2 questions. You're really testing
I'm
my,
my more. Yeah, there might be more.
Yeah, exactly. My memory.
1998, big year. What does the numbers 5255B mean to you?
Look at that bit of research. Yeah, so in diving, the dives have their codes, if you like. So
and I'm curious about this, by the way.
On.
Well, actually, I'll let you say it, because I wanted to know, does the number represent what the move is that you're going to tell me?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay,
so if it starts with a 1, it's forward. If it starts with a 2, it's backwards.
Right.
If it starts with a 3, it's reverse, which is standing forwards, jumping away and spinning backwards. If it starts with 4, it's an inwards, standing backwards, jumping away, spinning forwards. If it's a 5, it has a twist in it. And if it's a 6, it starts on your hands.
Right.
In a handstand, or in diving, it's an arm stand.
Yeah.
Just, semantics. And
just curious, because, I'm a big fan of skateboarding, right? And
okay.
In skateboarding, they have, like, the McTwist, or, the 900, and they, like, the skateboarders will call their names. So I was just wondering, why wasn't it just called, like, the Leon Taylor move, or whatever you wanted to call it? And I was like, 5255B. But anyway, tell us a little bit about the 5255B, because, and what does that mean? And what was the process of creating this?
Yeah, so up until that point in history, so 1998, as you rightly, your research has shown, there was easiest way to describe it is there's a list, a piece of paper called the tariff sheet, a couple of A4 pieces, if you like, and there's the dive written down, and then next to it is the degree of difficulty. So if you do a forward dive, easiest dive that you can do, off the 1 metre board, it carries a 1.1 degree of difficulty. If you do it in the tuck position, if you do it in the pike position, it's like a 1.2. I don't even know whether that's accurate, but I'm just giving you that as a picture.
Yeah.
And then you get the really complicated dives, and at the time it was like 3.5, I think, for forward 4.5 somersaults at 3.5, and that was all you could choose from when you were diving. So whatever diving competition in the world, that was the dives that you could choose from. And I'm not sure of the process at that time to get a new dive on there, but it wasn't very clear, and it hadn't happened for ages, and basically that was the box around what you could do. World Aquatics is known now, but FINA at the time were like, okay, we're going to freshen up the sport, we're going to change the rules slightly. All these dives on the sheets are valid, and here's a formula, like a computer game. So if you do a somersault that way, you get 0.5. If you do a twist, you get 0.4. If you do it in the pike position, you get 0.3. And you would basically be able to, like a computer game, make up any dive, right?
Wow.
Impossible or possible, right?
Yeah.
So then where's the gap? So you can make up a dive that you could never do, not even on a computer. Or you can start to think, well, okay, so this formula would now allow me to do 2.5 somersaults with 2.5 twists. And if I did that in the tuck position, it would be 3.6, world's most difficult. But in the pike position, it would be 3.8 at the time.
Right, yeah.
So you can see there's the whole thinking. I wonder if that's possible.
Yeah.
And then begins the process. So if you want to talk about the process, but that's the premise on how the rules changed, and then invited the opportunity. And what I thought, Ricky, was there was going to be the arms race. China are the dominant nation in our sport, and I thought, wow, the Chinese will definitely be doing this. I need to get on with it to keep up with them. But actually, they stayed in the box.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they stayed there for a long time, and then eventually they were like, oh, hang on, there's other people doing this now. Well, I was the first, and then 6 months later someone else, and they were like, oh, maybe we should come out of our what works for us, and it still does, and then start to be a bit more adventurous, because high risk, right?
Yeah, of course.
And the trouble is with that dive, high degree of difficulty, but you get the execution marks from the judges for how well you perform the dive. So whether it's the easiest dive in the world or the hardest dive in the world, the judges don't care. They're marking execution. Did you have your toes pointed? Did you go in vertically with no splash? Right, so there's this element. So they don't give you credit for trying a hard dive, through their execution marks. So I was actually, the dive was so hard, I was not able to perform it well enough for some time to break through into the medals. But what it did, Ricky, was change the perception of the judges. So up until that point, the judges, unconsciously or sometimes consciously, were like, China, they're going to be good. Great Britain, not so, right? And then what happened is they're like, who's this guy Taylor from Great Britain with, bright blonde hair, bleached blonde hair. It was 1998, as you mentioned. Wow, shock-haired Taylor. He's doing this dive back to the pike position. No one else can do it.
Wow, yeah.
And you imagine what that's done to the judges. The judges then like, oh, British diving.
Yeah.
Oh, they're doing. Not even the Chinese can do this. So it changed the perception, and so that actually played into my favour over the long term. And it's all about managing the dip in business, right?
Yeah.
So what are you going to do now that puts you out there that might not pay dividends in the short term, which it didn't for me, but did when I needed it to. So long term, over a period of years, it really counted for me because that change of perception in a sport where it's all about the perception of the judges.
Wow, interesting. I find it fascinating that, you know, competing at a competitive level, you think, you know, I'm just going to create something that's never been done before. I think that's fascinating. Well,
it was kind of the opportunity, and there's like, you know, like, oh, there's the opportunity here.
Yeah.
I could just play safe and do what I've always done. Right?
Yeah.
Or I can go, actually, and what was my reason why? Well, I'm going to change the perception of the judges, because if I do, maybe something will unlock and we would win the first, as it was for Peter and I, the first Olympic medal in 44 years for British diving.
Wow.
It's a long time, isn't it?
It's a long time. Was it, is it how many years, sorry?
44.
40. Wow. Well, I'm very fascinated by this. Obviously, there's a real big link here as well about what we're going to talk about as well, which is seems to be a running theme this year on the podcast as well. But obviously 2000, I think if my research right, obviously fourth Sydney Olympics. From that period, there was a dark space, a hole, you know. Yeah. And there's a mission that you've been talking about over the last couple of years, which I find fascinating, about the link between inability to moving to mental health. And there's some figures here which obviously links into what we're going to talk about. But 1 in 6 common mental disorders is depression and anxiety. So 1 in 6 people have a common mental disorder of depression and anxiety. 12 billion people, 12 billion, working days are lost to having depression and anxiety. 1 trillion, and that's in US dollars, 1 trillion lost for productivity. And also severe depression as well is rated in the same disability category as terminal cancer. I understand that was a difficult time for you, and if you're happy to, I'd love for you to explain
of course. I'd be delighted
how
to.
you dealt with that, and also this link about the idea of now movement, about helping us with our mental health.
All right, well, let's rewind then. So fourth at the Olympic Games, at that time, you know, some mistakes were made, focused on the outcome, and then it's like, right, okay, I know what I need to do now. I'm going to just, 4-year cycle, 7 hours a day, 6 days a week, boom, let's get it done. But at the time, it's an injury I've been successfully ignoring, with unhelpful mantras like pain is weakness leaving the body, just get on with it, you're effing tough, blah, blah, blah. Not true. Yeah. Pain is a signal from the body, you should stop and pay attention to it.
And just to cut in, is that because of like your peers?
Yeah, just the culture. It's
just
then people going, oh, you're tough, you're an Olympian, you're this, you're that. You know, this is the kind of culture that I was surrounded by, looking at how other people are behaving, and it's toxic at the time. So don't ask for help, just get on with it, be tough, push through. So I approached my mental health issues with that battle as well. So I had surgery. I was given a 30% chance of making it back, 6 months of rehabilitation, made it back, kind of struggled back into the pool. It's not quite right. I need another surgery now that I'm under time pressure. And if I don't compete for Great Britain, recover from a second surgery, my dreams are over. I'm off the team, no Olympic Games. So I put everything into it. I go, right, what's going to distract me? I know, friends. Not going to see them. How are you? Fine. Not seeing you. Family. Not seeing you. What am I going to focus on? Being 6% body fat. I'm going to really focus on that. I'm going to get really stressed about fat in this and in that and blah, blah, blah with that. And I'm going to just focus on this. I'm going to see my performance psychologist and tell him everything's fine. I'm focused on this goal and that goal and this goal and that goal. I was dying inside, crying into my cornflakes. Wouldn't tell anyone because I'm tough. I'm an Olympian, the identity and subsequently, retrospectively, suggested diagnosed, with a period of depression because of the symptoms I was facing. I'm very extroverted and I was like, get my energy from other people, and I was not surrounding myself with people with all of these behaviours. And, a story which I tell on stage is such like there's a point, where, I kind of hit, for me, a point of like giving up, right? Because I was fighting. I was like, that's it. I'm never doing this sport again. And that was the moment it turned around for me, where I suddenly realised, oh, hang on a second. What am I focusing on? All the stuff, the details. I'm physiology of depression. I've kind of like hunched shoulders, like hadn't smiled for months and months and months. And that realisation of light bulb moment, why'd you do this sport? Well, because I enjoy it. Well, you're not looking like you're enjoying it.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So I had just a short period of time before the competition where the wheels had come off and I'd given up to the Commonwealth Games. 5 weeks, that negative spiral I was stuck in went the other way. back into enjoying, big smile, blonde hair was back, you know, whoa, here we go, you know, like really just, you know, it's you know, just starting to embody physiology of expansion and smiling, and all this stuff now has been scientifically explored. But at the time, it was just like shoulders back, chin up, big smile. I'm loving this. It doesn't really matter what happens because I'm doing the thing I get to. Aren't I lucky? Yes, you are. And the positive spiral went, and then I was back on, you know, a trajectory, right? But with the knowledge of what it was like to really suffer and not ask for help, not be honest, not have those conversations. And then that, I feel very fortunate that I went through that period. At the time, obviously, I hated it and why me and, you know, wishing it away. But the learnings from them were so incredibly powerful because lots of athletes now talk about their dark times and mental health issues, and really famous and very successful athletes as well, which is worth shining a light on, because we sometimes get this, oh yeah, you're amazing, you know, superhero-esque, but actually we're human beings with our own worries. And often, you know, from, you know, there's an interesting backstory along the way, and then informed my TED talk. So I think that's kind of where we're going, which is 2018 TEDx Clapham, how to manage your mental health. And through my own experience, and then through my subsequent then passion for, you know, getting people moving and mental health, and looking at the stats, which some of which you've just shared there, and young people, you know, scary. The stats were just, you know, very sure, what are we missing here? What are we not doing? And for me, this whole link between physical movement and our mental health. Obviously, physical movement affects our physical health, heart disease, and I was reading all these stats, and I was like, yeah, but what's happening here? And so then having and there's even more research now in the 5 or 6 years since I stood on that stage, what happens, you know, from a neurobiological point of view, just moving the body to a different position makes a huge difference to what your experience of the world. But naturally we can kind of take on these different physiologies, smiling, you know, all of these wonderful things. And so for me, it became a very
and even someone, sorry to go in, with limited mobility can still change their posture, can't they? Like, you know, if they're unable to walk or to move, then there's still other areas of the body that you can still do that to have that impact.
Yeah, certainly. And of course, to a certain degree, most people are able to breathe, and there's certain ways you can adjust and manipulate your breathing in order to change your state and, you know, how you're feeling. So there's a whole, you know, sometimes, you know, because I'm feeling happy, I'm smiling, but actually the reverse is true. So if you're not feeling great and you start smiling, and it's a bit of a fake one to start with, but then you're smiling back at me for whatever reason. And then my, because becomes a Duchenne smile, then my smile's naturally neurochemically, my brain's going, oh, he's happy. And I can't be fearful at the same time as happy. You just see what I mean? There's this whole like, you know, I'm feeling like this. Oh no, I'm not. And then you can adjust it. And the same with, you know, how you hold your body. And of course, just movement, the neurochemistry, just like getting up and going for a walk, or to do something more vigorous, or if you're unable to do those things, whatever you can do, can you change your, you know, through physical movement, whatever's available to you, has a profound effect on your biology.
Totally. Yeah. And there's a huge, I mean, as you've mentioned, obviously, in your TED talk, the World Health Organization talk about stress is an epidemic, you know, and just there's so many things that we can do to clear rid of that stress. It seems to be, and again, I don't have the facts of the data in, you know, hopefully I'm not going to get anyone in trouble here, but it seems that, you know, this often talks a lot about podcasts, about medication seems to be just the very quickest way to deal with something. And, you know, obviously if people are very severely ill and, you know, need to seek medical attention, then please do. But there are some other ways that, you know, we can do this, like you said, that start moving, that start doing things that can start getting rid of that stress, and physical movements can help with that one.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, look, there's various interventions, and I think physiology first.
Yeah.
Like, look at that.
Quickest way to change. I always remember this, you know, when I first met you, the quickest way to change how you feel. Change your state, change your physiology, move. Yeah,
exactly. So whatever that is. So reviewing what you're doing. What are you doing? Well, I'm sitting around all day, not moving the body. Okay, well, let's just change that slightly. Yeah. Let's just set an alarm for every, 45 minutes arbitrary, and do 5 minutes of like pacing up and down in your room, or just stand up with your desk. I haven't got a standing desk. Great. What about Amazon boxes or something similar? Just build it up, you know, just, and you could just start small, you know, and it's like, well, you know, can I get a little bit more upright when I'm seated? Can I just introduce movement snacking? You know, I'm busy. Great. Can you do, 10 squats while you're making a cup of tea? Movement snack, just bring in, see what happens. Do you feel a bit lighter in your mood? Do you feel less frazzled? Take your shoes off, put your feet on the earth. All these, exactly. There's lots of different things, and it's starting small, making it, something that almost takes it's too easy. It's so easy. It's impossible to fail.
Yeah.
You start there, and again, a big
Yeah.
shout out to James Clear and a lot of the stuff that he's highlighted through his work. And there's been plenty of researchers before looking at habits and how they're formed. But James Clear for me is I was very fortunate to receive a copy of his book before it became like the super bestseller that it is now, and I was like, wow, this is all the kind of stuff I've been playing with, and he's just got it like really succinctly put into and there's loads of stuff in that I hadn't considered that is amazing. And so it forms a lot of my executive coaching and a lot of my mentoring,
of course,
is like looking at how we do that. So my passion for movement. So there's like exercise will change your brain. That's scientifically proven. Wendy Suzuki and all of her research, fantastic TED talk. She talks about the changes in the brain, and she's a neuroscientist. So if you want a credible spokesperson for that, then go and watch her TED talks. It's incredible. Amy Cuddy, another great one on physical, how you hold your body and the effect that has. So, movement will disrupt stress. If you're feeling stressed, if you go for a walk, take 10 breaths, vigorously shake, there's all these things that will change your state.
Yeah.
And thinking will often make it worse. That's one of my phrase that pays in my TEDx, isn't it?
It's like a cliche though for any specific listeners watching or listening. Yeah, is
it's like thinking isn't necessarily the solution to our problems. Thinking is often the cause.
Yeah,
and I say that because we get stuck in patterns of overthinking. Oh, God, I'm doing this. I need to think my way out of it. And there's many. We can look for inspiration in many places, and we can always disrupt the build-up of stress through an intervention like breathing and or movement or both.
Definitely, yeah, absolutely. That's one of my favourite quotes that we use in the Confident Club. I love that. Well, it's the time is cracking on, rightly, and we're having so much fun doing this. So I'm very curious to kind of understand a couple of things from you before we wrap up. Which is, firstly, I guess knowing what you know, the journey that you've been on, the processes and habits that you've embedded in your life. Life is difficult. It's tough, right? We've got kids, right?
Yeah.
We mentioned, right?
No, life is
really hard.
Life is hard.
Life is really hard. So what is, a lot of the listeners will listen to this, the business owners, the SMEs, we've got people in HR, L&D. What is your top tip to unlock the best version of yourself?
Well, I'm taking a breath and I think, what would be, because you've given me one top tip, haven't you? Or maybe I can extrapolate.
2 or 3 if you like.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the thing that we were just talking about there, it's the taking a moment. We live in such a fast pace, and believe you me, I run at a very fast pace. Not physically run; I'm quite a slow runner, but as in my mind, So for me to be a proponent of slowing down everything when as an athlete needed to be done by yesterday, and if it wasn't done by yesterday, it was late. That kind of drive and determination, and life goes by. Like on a train and like the lampposts or whatever. So taking a moment to settle yourself, before anything, and I think this notion of savoring.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm doing a lot of that at the moment with. Instead of going, right, bath, bed, quick story, quick on to the next thing, I'm like, okay, it's bath time, I'm going to be here. So again, little things like not having my phone in my pocket, so it's not a problem.
Yeah.
Not looking at my watch thinking, I wonder what time that thing starts.
Yeah.
Not that you can just pause it now, can't we? But do you see what I mean? There was this element of urgency. So for me, it's like, where can you create a bit of space to find ease? A lot available. And it could be as simple as... before I answer that question. And that totally, by demoing that to you, has put me, and I was pretty relaxed anyway because I was enjoying our conversation. And that just moment to settle and find ease before continuing with whatever I'm on. And the more you can grab those moments and find ease and slow down, the more you'll start to savour what you're doing, because the small stuff, as I've learned, are the things. We had all these big stuff, Olympic this, and I've done all of that in my own journey, and that's incredible, and I wouldn't change that for the world, and that's my backstory. And now savouring the moment, because you never know when each of those is going to be the last. And I think that's really playing out for me now as a father. It's like, when's the last time he's going to call me in the night, and he's now no longer having bottles or anything. So that was the last time. And I didn't know it was the last time, but it was. And so now I'm not missing him waking me up in the night calling, because he still does. But you see, there's always that, it will be the last time. And it's, and there's like, we're surrounded by everything changes. So that's savouring for me is something that I've been exploring.
Just add to that then, Leon, because I absolutely love that. Yeah, it's quite a funny thing. But do you remember like CD-ROMs?
I do.
When was the last time that you burnt music on a CD? Right, it just stops one day.
Yeah,
you go,
yeah.
but you don't realise. Oh, today's going to be the last day it happens, and with our kids as well. My wife, I don't know if your wife does the same, but constantly she goes, "Rick, look at this photo that's just appeared on my iPhone," because the iPhones have that ability to go, "Here's last year's photo." Like, wow.
Yeah, who's that?
Yeah, who's that? One of my favourite things that I like to explore, like when it's really difficult, it's really frustrating. This is all over social media if you've ever seen this. But if you're having a really tough time and you want to save that moment, so, let's just change my state a little bit, I imagine that I've gone back in time. Have you heard about this?
Maybe, but go on.
So you imagine that you've just travelled back in time from 40 years in the future to be present right now with Alma or Ziggy at this moment. And how beautiful would that be? Imagine, because in 4 years' time, they're going to be older.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed they're still here. Their own life. They're not going to want to talk to Dad, who's now an old 60-year-old, 70-year-old man. So let's just imagine right now, let's visualise, what would it be like if I was travelling back in time and enjoying this lovely toddler? Because that's what I'll miss,
Very nice. Great.
So savouring was your thing, sorry, to cut back to. And was there one more, I think you were going to say?
No, it's just, what does that do? Well, it's first of all, take a moment to find ease.
Yeah.
And then you can access that. So what do I do now? I've got this ease because I've just taken a step to have a stretch, to take a breath, to take a moment. What do I do now? Well, I get the choice to savour it.
Yeah.
Because I'm not accelerating on to the next best thing. Because we all know when we accelerate to, it's all about this weekend, and then this weekend passes, then we're, quick, look into the future. What's the next thing? And we're always future-paced often. So there's that element of, being present in the motion that kind of speaks to where I am with my practice of yoga and such like, and it is a practice, right? Because I often speed off into the future. In fact, I'm doing that now, thinking,
I feel the same. Yeah,
I wonder what's next after this podcast.
Soon, isn't it? Yeah. Well, final question for you, and there's no surprises here, so it is a final question for you. But so beyond all, obviously, your wonderful athletic achievements, what impact do you hope to leave on future generations of athletes, probably pursuing dreams to be like yourself, or even individuals pursuing their dreams?
So I think imparting what I discovered along the way, insights, discoveries and observations in such a way that can shine a light particularly on, so looking at young athletes and those, what you do and who you are, and it's the human first kind of thing. So I would love to, through my own discoveries and mistakes, if you like, is to give people the chance to not give themselves such a hard time in the pursuit of goals, which may, when you get them, be meaningless. And that sounds quite harsh, but there's many, trophies and medals that have been won, and you get there and you go, is this it?
Yeah,
right.
Of course,
so
all that time,
we could choose to be fulfilled along the way, and we would do that with a different approach. Go, I do this thing, magic, diving, presenting, whatever, and I'm a human being, and here are the the small things that make up that level of joy, gratitude and fulfillment each day. And you can still have a strong preference for being a high performer, and I acknowledge that, and what a wonderful pursuit, but don't make it all about that, because it's empty and it's slippery slope.
Lovely words, thank you. Leon, thank you for coming on to the Unlocked podcast. Pleasure to have you on there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricky.
Cheers.